Hello, my friends. Let's start with the fact that Trump keeps making more and more statements. Today, he said that he doesn't see any chance of Ukraine joining NATO. I don't see a country in Russia's position allowing Ukraine, just in their position, to join NATO. I don't see that happening. As we can see, Trump is saying that Russia won't allow Ukraine to join in NATO, but how to comment on this, I think you know better than I do. Meanwhile, Kellogg stated that Ukraine's territorial losses will be documented in an agreement. U.S. Special Representative Kellogg stated that Ukraine's territorial losses will be recorded in a special agreement. However, in his view, this doesn't mean official recognition. There will be some sort of agreement regarding the possible loss of territories. But listen, you don't necessarily have to recognize it, he said in an interview with Fox News, comparing the situation to the U.S. stance on Soviet sovereignty over the Baltic states. Kellogg emphasized that this issue should be viewed in the long term, but it will inevitably be part of the negotiations. Essentially, he said that the loss of territories will be documented in an agreement that you'll sign, and then you can choose not to recognize the land as Russian, but in reality, it won't matter anymore. At the same time, it's reported that Zelensky didn't sign the resource agreement. Zelensky didn't sign the financial agreement on rare earth minerals that was offered to him by US Treasury Secretary Bessent. It's also reported that Ukraine is still analyzing the US proposal, which is why Zelensky hasn't signed the document yet and will do so in Munich during his meeting with the US Vice President. Ukraine is still analyzing the proposal regarding rare earth minerals. A final response will be given in Munich during the meeting with US Vice President J.D. Vance. And now, Britain is already calling for sending its troops to Ukraine. Forcing Ukraine to make concessions would be the greatest betrayal since the partition of Poland, said British politician Ed Davey, aiming the US refusal to provide Ukraine with security guarantees. The leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, stated that in the British Parliament that forcing Ukraine to cede territory to Russia would be the greatest betrayal since 1945. He emphasized that it's now critically important to strengthen Ukraine's position. Scholz also made a statement. Scholz called on the Bundestag to declare a state of emergency in Germany following the latest US statements on Ukraine. The German Chancellor proposed that the Bundestag urgently pass a resolution recognizing the war in Ukraine as an emergency, which would allow additional defense funding without affecting other state expenditures. He also suggested reforming the debt break by excluding military spending from the national debt calculation to ensure long-term support for Ukraine and strengthen Germany's defense capabilities. The Chancellor stressed that no peace decisions can be made without the participation of Ukraine and Europe, and that Ukraine's capitulation would threaten the security of the entire continent. A peace agreement must guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty and long-term stability. Clearly, alarm bells are ringing everywhere and dissatisfaction is growing because if we call things by their names, what is happening now is practically a capitulation. And the fact that Trump continues negotiations without Ukraine and Europe is further confirmed by reports from last night about yet another plane from Washington to Moscow. A special U.S. Air Force transport aircraft, the Gulfstream C-37B, recently arrived in Moscow. This aircraft is designed for transporting diplomatic delegations as well as high-ranking government officials and Defense Department personnel. In general, the negotiations are moving forward actively, and we're waiting to see how events will unfold next and what exactly Trump will be negotiating with Putin Putin. Meanwhile, the fighting on the front lines continue, and let's start right away with the Pokrovsk direction, as this remains the area with the most assaults, even despite an overall decrease in activity. Russian forces are attempting to break through to Zhirove, storming the villages of Promeny and Yelizavetivka, and have even claimed control over Vodяне Druge. However, the Ukrainian side hasn't confirmed this information, so for now, there have been no confirmed changes on the front line over the past 24 hours. In the Kurakhove direction, Russian troops continue advancing, and the situation in the Dachny area has deteriorated. The Ukrainian forces report that the situation is critical and they are being forced to retreat. However, fighting is still ongoing for Ulakli, Konstantinopel, and Andriivka. Here, Russian forces are trying to strengthen the front line as quickly as possible, so the assaults are not stopping. In the Velyka Novosilka area, Russian forces have managed to advance toward the village of Burlatske. The Ukrainian forces describe the situation as follows. After regrouping and accumulating forces, the Russians have begun moving northwest of Velyka Novosilka. Right now, we simply don't have enough troops here, so the Russians are taking advantage, seizing our positions step by step. They're actively advancing toward Novosilka and Previlny. Additionally, they have resumed their push toward Rozliv, but our fighters stopped them, striking their shelters, equipment, and personnel. In total, 16 Russian troops and one armored vehicle were destroyed. Overall, Russian forces continue to advance despite suffering heavy losses. Meanwhile, in the Zaporizhia direction, Russian troops are increasing their activity and attempting to storm Sherbaky and Kamensk. They are also conducting heavy shelling, but no territorial changes have been reported in the past 24 hours. In the Kherson direction, Russian forces have temporarily decreased their activity and are not conducting any new attacks. However, shelling of the right bank continues periodically. Now, moving on to the Toretsk direction, here Russian forces are storming Sherbinivka and attempting to break through beyond Toretsk in the Slag Heap area. However, so far the Ukrainian forces are not allowing them to gain a foothold, and the front line hasn't changed in the past 24 hours. In the Chasiv Yar direction, fighting continues in the central part of the city, but Russian forces haven't achieved any new successes. The front line remains unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Siversk direction, Russian forces continue their attacks on Vasyukivka. They are also storming Bilogorivka and Verkhnyokamyansk, but the Ukrainian forces have so far managed to repel all attacks with no changes in the front line in the past day. In the Liman direction, Russian forces are storming Novolyubivka, the village of Kolodezi and Yampolivka. Despite managing to expand their controlled territory around Ivanivka, they have been unable to advance further. The Ukrainian forces are preventing them from getting closer to Liman. The front line has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Burova direction, Russian forces are storming Bogoslavka, attempting to break through near Lozova and assaulting Kopanki. Further south, they are advancing through the fields near the village of Makiyevka. However, the Ukrainian forces have successfully repelled these attacks, and there have been no changes to the front line. In the Kupiansk direction, activity has increased. Russian forces are attempting to break through to Kindrashivka, storming Petropavlivka, and advancing near Pishane and Novoosinovo. Fierce battles are also ongoing in the fields near Stepova Novoselivka. There have been no changes to the front line over the past 24 hours, but the fighting continues. In the Kharkiv direction, there has been no new activity. Russian forces are conducting artillery shelling without any offensive actions. Even in Vovchansk, the fighting has ceased for now, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kursk direction, the Russian counteroffensive continues, but they haven't achieved any new successes. Over the past 24 hours, there has been no changes to the front line. Meanwhile, Zelensky has stated that if Russia starts a new war, 100,000 Americans stationed in Europe will fight against Russia.
As I said yesterday, when we were talking with the minister, I told him that there are your American brigades, NATO forces, and they are on European soil. And if there is a quick invasion, and if it happens, it will be quick, your military will fight. And we cannot just talk about profit, because, yes, financiers ask, what's the profit? I told him, it's just saving the lives of your people, because somewhere, I don't know, there are about 100,000 American troops in Europe. They will fight, and not everyone will survive because this is war, and because these are Russians.
Clearly, he said directly that they cannot stand up against the Russians. Feel free to share your thoughts on this statement in the comments. Meanwhile, Russians, in connection with the beginning of negotiations between Trump and Putin, have started recalling another statement by Zhirinovsky, which everyone laughed at back then.
The main Russian question. Here, Putin will meet with Trump, and they could reach an agreement. It would be a great achievement. The Koreans are in the Far East. The Syrians are in the Near East. But if he lets them agree, what would they agree on? Ukraine, yes, will live in 5 regions, and we will separate it. It will join NATO and the European Union wherever they want. But the entire Novorossiya, he gives his consent, or rather, does not object. Everything will be under the Russian flag, like Crimea and Donbas. So he solves 3 conflicts, 3-time Nobel Prize laureates, and normal relations with Russia and China. But at the same time, he will crush Europe, because he hates it. He fled from it, just like Slobin fled from Russia, like Stankiewicz fled to Poland, like all the others. So, he will achieve re-election for a 2nd term, then his daughter will have 2 terms, and his son-in-law will have 3 terms until 2040. And this family will treat America kindly and will go down in history as the best president, better than Roosevelt and all the rest. You'll see. That's how it will happen.
What do you think about what's happening today? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.